Hello, I'm Washayla Sananda, and I'm here with spiritual ascension tips, actionable tips for your spiritual ascension process that you can do right here and now. So, what I want to talk to you about today is committing to ways of being. And so, in conscious life creation, this is something that we talk about a lot. It's how you're being, who you're being, and what that is for you, what that looks like in your life. And you might say, a whole list of things and ways that you want to be, states that you want to be, and yet, when you go out into your life, you might find that that's not actually the way that you're being. And you can tell by how well or how not well your life is working, and by the relationships that you have and what other people are reflecting back to you. So, what I like to talk about today is committing to a way of being, because when you commit to a way of being, you're choosing it and you're standing for yourself to be that way, even when you don't feel like it. Commitment is not a feeling, commitment is a way of being committed to what you've chosen to be in the world. And you're not always going to feel like it. Let's face it. Some days you're going to wake up feeling ready to go and you're going to feel the energy and you're going to be ready to conquer the world. And other days you're just going to not feel it and probably want to sleep in, not feeling like getting out of bed. So that's okay. This is a way of stepping into your way of being as a committed way of being versus as, "Oh, I'll be committed," or "I'll do it when I feel like it." So I'm going to use the example of love and fear because it is the most obvious one. When you're committed to love, not fear, there's a certain way of being in the world. And I personally have a story about this that will exemplify this for you, and it's made a huge impact in my life. So, as I've shared previously and in my book, I was visited by ETs, by galactics from the time I was very young, very, very young, small child. And I would be afraid of them. They scared me. They would always show up in my room at night when, wake me up from sleeping. And there were times when I was terrified, a lot of times when I was terrified to have them show up. So, fortunately, at some point in my adult life, I became connected to a woman. Her name's Cynthia Crawford. She's an ET sculptor and a hybrid. And she taught me a technique for overcoming that fear of what was showing up at night. And she said, it's a practice. So, you project. This is the technique, is that when something shows up at night in the room or anywhere, it could be during the day too, however it works out for you, and this can be done with people, not just with galactics, but when something shows up and you're frightened, practice projecting love. And if they are of love, they will project that love back to you and you'll feel connected and you'll get a boost of energy, or whatever happens will be very lovely, right? It'll be from love and you'll experience that. But if they are not from love, if they're not benevolent, if they have some darkness, some dark agenda that they're there to serve, then they will not like the love that you're projecting and they will simply go away. In most cases, they'll just disappear. They'll be uncomfortable. They won't be able to hang out in your frequency if you're truly being of love. So the way that this came to pass is I found out quickly that you can't just go from fear to love in a heartbeat when you haven't practiced it, because something shows up that's frightening and you go into adrenaline and you feel afraid, and it's very difficult to project love from a place of fear. In fact, I would say it's next to impossible. Maybe somebody has figured it out, but it's very difficult to project love out of fear, out of a fear reaction like adrenaline. So I had to practice during my waking hours when I wasn't afraid, when I wasn't feeling confronted. I imagined the scenario. I imagined something showing up that was frightening to me, and I imagined projecting love, and I practiced and I practiced and I practiced. And within not too long, something shows up at night, and I practiced projecting love, and I kind of started to get there, but I went into fear, right? And then another time, and I kind of did a little better, but then I went into fear. And then, finally it happened another time. We'll say the third time. I don't really remember how many times, but on the third time, I projected love, and I didn't go into fear. I was committed to love. And guess what happened? That being, poof, disappeared just in an instant. There was nothing there to scare me anymore. And there was never anything there to scare me again. And what I found going forward is that every being that showed up after my truly being aligned and committed to love was of love, was offering me something, was benevolent. And perhaps all of them always were, and they were only reacting to who I was being afraid, right? So what I learned from that is, first, number one, and this is what the tip is for the day. Number one, figure out what you're committing to. Maybe it's love, maybe it's something else. Write it down and practice it. Practice it right now. How does it feel? How does your heart feel when you're practicing what you're committed to? It might be love, it might be joy, it might be passion, it might be generosity, it might be gratitude, it might be something else. But if it's gratitude, for instance, practice, what does gratitude feel like? Think of a time when you truly, truly were grateful, and practice, and then practice again. And when you find yourself feeling ungrateful or victimized or unhappy about something that's going on, practice, go back to that practice. Oh yes, for me, when I practice gratitude, it's when my children were born, that moment where they've emerged and I'm holding them, and just this, it's an overwhelm of gratitude, just an overwhelming gratitude. That for me is just beyond any other feeling. So when I practice gratitude, I especially when I was learning to generate gratitude in an instant, I would remember that. Maybe you don't have children, maybe it's something else for you. Maybe it's the unconditional love of a partner or a spouse or a pet. Pets are very unconditionally loving. Maybe you have gratitude for that love, but think of some time in your life, maybe someone did something wonderful for you or helped you. Think of a time where you felt overwhelming gratitude and practice that. Think of a time where you felt overwhelmed with love and practice that until you can generate it in a moment. And someone says, now think of love, be of love. You can be like, yes, I know what that feels like. I've practiced it enough. In a moment, I can project that. And so this is your practice every day. You might want to put a note on your mirror. You might want to put a note in your car or wherever you spend a lot of time, by your computer. Practice love, practice gratitude, practice generosity, whatever that is that you're practicing. I would say do one at a time until you've really got it. And then go into the world and practice it. Practice it with the people that upset you. Practice it with things that usually trigger or bother you. And this is how you raise your frequency. Because the more you practice these higher frequency ways of being, the more you ascend your energy and the more you ascend your frequency. And then guess what? You become contagious. You become, the love that you hold in your field becomes contagious. The gratitude becomes contagious. You just automatically share it. So that is my tip for you today. Figure out what you're committed to and practice it many times a day. Practice generating the feeling and practice being of that way of being, and see what happens in your life. Thank you so much for listening. Namaste.